we had a meeting specific to that issue. As a matter of fact, the office, both political parties expressed concern, right, that potential residents or people who were replacing their cards were turned away and asked to go to another office, right, so there was a boundary issue, right, and that boundary issue around what we now call Mount Rush, right. So the office thought it was responsible thing to do to invite both parties to sit for us to have a conversation, right? And I must say, by all indication, it was a very, very good dialogue from both political parties. We were very clear as to what, you know, the outcome of the meeting should be. Now, what you observe there, Dr. Bob, is that at the time of it's not Mount Rush, but the housing scheme, right? I mean, prior to that, when the boundaries and so on, there was no housing scheme there. So the housing scheme is there, and to me, by our investigation, what we discovered is that a lot of the persons who were beneficiaries of the houses were actually from the town of St. George, right? And by so doing, they maintain that whole. Now, after having that very fruitful discussion with both political parties, we realize the only way we can solve that issue is to go into an enumeration process, which we don't have the luxury of time to do, right? So we agreed, in principle, to let the status quo remain as is for now, right? In both parties, we agree. And then, of course, in due time, we'd have to address it through the Boundaries Commission would have to, again, redefine the boundaries, and then we take it from there. So that is where, it was a very good meeting. So that meeting specifically with the both parties dealt with that issue. We also had a very fruitful engagement with the National Democratic Congress, but separate and apart from that, right? Out of that meeting, they indicated that they would like to have an engagement with us, and subsequently they wrote to us and underscoring the issues that they would like to discuss. And I must say we were able to ventilate all of the issues. A lot of clarities were sought. Of course, as I said earlier, the issue of how do we make sure that persons are registered where they ought to register, which leads to voter fraud in the wider context, but voter pardon, as most people will say. So we look at that issue, and I think maybe out of that too had spurred some of the claims and objection that persons highlighted. They also highlighted the fact that during the 2018 election, there were some objections that were made, and of course, they weren't satisfied how it was, you know, addressed. So we take upon ourselves to look again at this and see how we go forward in terms of making sure that those issues are addressed. There is, and the conflict comes in terms of the boundary issue, especially where you have populated areas and the boundary is separated, you know, by a road or a river, right? That's how we do it. So sometimes if somebody comes and they do not give a proper description as to where they're at, is like, you know, whether you're above the road or under the road, because sometimes that's what you have to use to determine where that person, which polling division that person or constituency that person should be. So that is done. Now, the beautiful thing about it now is that because of the urgency and the level of interest shown relative to the objection, I think now we are in a better place. Because in case somebody was able to slip through the crack, that would take care of it. So I think that is we on the right track in terms of addressing that issue.